McLaren are clearly on top on the opening day of the Bahrain Grand Prix, as its rivals are all left chasing the famous papaya outfit. From Racing News 365, my name is Nick Goldie, and I'm delighted to be joined, as always, by lead editor Ian Parks. Ian, a pretty interesting day on the circuit. No real big dramas, apart from one between two Williams drivers in free practice one. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Oscar Piastri on top, Lando Norris second, but the McLaren team, against all its rivals, looking so dominant.
Yeah, the key thing about practice today, Nick, you have to bear in mind that the second practice session here is the most representative going into qualifying and the Grand Prix, of course, because as we know, FP1 held earlier on Friday and FP3 are in the heat of the day. FP2, as I mentioned, in the more representative condition under a light clear as a Bahrain international circuit, when we've got twilight going into the evening time. So yes, we saw track temperatures drop, the air temperature drop, and of course in FP2, when, as I say, those conditions were at their optimum, soft tyre running, low fuel running, McLaren's comfortably on the top, and it was Oscar Piastri with a clear advantage, a tenth and a half over his McLaren teammate Lando Norris. And the nearest challenger, both George Russell and Ferrari Charles Leclerc, half a second back in third and fourth, respectively. The rest pretty much trailing in the McLaren's wake, as we saw. So yes, we knew McLaren were going to be good in this condition. That was a suspected feeling. That's the way it's turned out. And I think we're going to see a McLaren front row lockout in qualifying. Anything else other than that, I would be seriously surprised unless somebody has really held, got something up their sleeve, has really held something back. So yes, McLaren looking good, that's for sure. Has anybody got anything left in the can that can really go ahead and challenge them? That's the big question going into Saturday evening qualifying.
I can't go over the fact that it's nighttime view and it's beautiful, like mid-afternoon for me. It's like, it feels so weird. I can't get used to it. But as always, as has been the case really throughout the opening rounds this season, with the exception, of course, of Suzuka, it was George Russell in third for Mercedes' position. He's kind of making his own this year. And it does look once again that the Ferraris, yes, Leclerc look good. Lewis Hamilton, not so much with upgrades for this weekend as well. It does look like Mercedes are perhaps on paper, again, the closest challenger to McLaren, but still, again, as you mentioned, 5 tenths behind.
Hard to say, yes. Krista points out that Ferrari has got a considerable upgrade package on that car this weekend in Bahrain. Probably the biggest that we've seen so far of any of the teams deliver. Major new floor configuration that's been placed on that car for both Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. Bit of back-to-back comparison that went on in FP1 when Lewis was in the car and Charles Leclerc was replaced by Dino Begovic. So a lot of comparison work that took place there. So FP2, brand new floor on that car. Then they were able to get a really good handle on it. But as you pointed out, Charles Leclerc half a second back. Lewis Hamilton a full second back in eighth position on that timesheet. Maybe a lot of work for McLaren still to do. We kind of thought, bearing in mind what we saw from Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari in particular in the sprint qualifying and the sprint race itself in the Chinese Grand Prix, when there were unseasonably warm conditions at the Shanghai International Circuit, we thought, has McLaren hit a bit of a sweet spot given those warmer conditions? And I suspected, many others suspected, not just me, that Ferrari would go really well here because we knew it was going to be a hell of a lot warmer. But quite apart from what we've seen, both drivers, Ferrari all round, still has a lot of work to do. But of course, we're comparing it to McLaren, bearing in mind how far they are ahead.
Yeah.
It could be a nip and tuck thing between Mercedes especially and Ferrari. That's who might be best for the rest. But Red Bull especially, a lot of work to do. Max Verstappen feeling really uncomfortable. He only had FP2. It's, of course, the most representative session because he was replaced in FP1 by Ayumu Iwasa, the Red Bull reserve driver there. Matt struggling with brakes in particular, so he didn't have a really comfortable session. So once again, but we've seen this so far this season, Nate, Red Bull struggling on a Friday. Has he got anything left in his locker to challenge on Saturday evening here in Bahrain. Can Max get anywhere near those McLarens? Only time will tell, to use your key phrase of this season so far.
You've stolen my saying. That's not fair.
I
I've got to
have,
think of a
mate.
new one now.
I
That's
have.
not
Sorry
fair.
about
I was going to get it in at least once, and now I can't. That's not very fair. But on the topic of Red Bull, though, another team who we don't quite know really where they are. We saw in Suzuka that from Friday into Saturday, the car was turned upside down using Christian Horner's words. You imagine they've got to do the exact same thing again in Bahrain because Max was in the top 10, unlike Yuki Tsunoda, who's towards the bottom. Of the top 4 teams, you do have to look and think it's Red Bull who have probably got the most time to find.
At the moment, yes. In particular, as you say, bearing in mind where Yuki Tsunoda was, and when you consider, yet again, Isaac Hadjar delivering a great performance for Racing Bulls, finishing just fractionally ahead, just slightly under a tenth of a second ahead of Max Verstappen. He was 6th quickest on that timesheet. That tells you an awful lot about just how decent that Racing Bull package is at the moment. And in particular, in the hands of young Isaac, who has really rebounded from that formation lap crash at the Australian Grand Prix that we knew he beat himself up over so badly, but he's come bouncing back. And yet again, he's shown that he's got a good turn of pace in that car as well. And so I'm expecting Isaac and Racing Bulls to be in the mix behind, if not right at the forefront with the Mercedes and Ferraris who are looking to advance, make advances on McLaren. But I'm definitely expecting young Isaac to be reasonably in the mix in the top 10 anyway, come qualifying.
I apologise for any loud noises. To the right of me, of my right shoulder, is a man with a cooler who's just dropped it once and everything fell out. He's just put it all back in, only to drop it again. So that's not a very good day for him. Apologies for that. But very quickly, I'm going to pick up my laptop now to go through the top 10. For those who watched yesterday's F1 update, I think it took us about 2-3 hours to record. That's never happened before. A lot of technical issues. To make sure that doesn't happen, I've even got my laptop on standby, just to be sure. So I'm going to read through the top 10 very, very quick because I don't want this to go wrong. Piastri on top, Lando Norris in second at the end of the opening day, George Russell third, Charles Leclerc fourth, Kimi Antonelli again impressed me in fifth, Isaac Hadjar, as Ian just mentioned, in P6, Verstappen 7, Lewis Hamilton 8, Ollie Behrman P9, and Carlos Sainz P10, which brings us on very, very nicely to young Carlos, because obviously on Thursday, the big talking point was he going to get fined by the FIA? Was he going to get community service like Max Verstappen did? No, Ian, he's getting nothing.
Yeah, I did say in the Thursday update video that I would be very surprised if Carlos Sainz was not punished. And guess what? When I spoke to the FIA and the FIA delegate told me that no, they would not be pursuing the case against Carlos Sainz, I was very surprised. However, at least the FIA delegate, a gentleman by the name of Cameron Kelleher, who is here in Bahrain representing the FIA, overseeing the Grand Prix, he could explain why Carlos Sainz would not be receiving, or at least he would be not forwarding the case to the steward, because that's the way it works. The FIA delegate has to make a call. He has to deem it whether it's worth the steward's while for something like that to be presented to the stewards and for them to then adjudicate. So Cameron managed to track down Carlos. He had a good long chat with him. And in fairness to Carlos, he was very repentant. He apologized profusely for the use of his word, which was the word shit, which I read some of the comments underneath our Thursday video. And for most people, they don't, whichever country you might come from, they don't consider that to be a swear word. So on this occasion, nevertheless, Carlos, as I say, very repentant, kind of a little bit of a humor gone awry, because staying in mind this use of that word after what had happened to him at the Japanese Grand Prix, where of course he went for that their unscheduled toilet break just ahead of the national anthem ceremony. He needed a quick toilet pit stop because he was struggling with stomach problems that had been diagnosed as well by the FIA doctor. So he used the phrase "shit happens," and it didn't quite work. Cameron Kelleher, as I mentioned, the FIA delegate, was overseeing that press conference at the time. I looked at him when Carlos said that phrase, and Cameron rolled his eyes. So you could tell that he was not quite best pleased at that stage. But nevertheless, as I say, he tracked down Carlos. They had a chat, a good long chat. Carlos very repentant. And so he felt that on this occasion, given for Carlos's position and his character and his demeanor, that Cameron would not forward it on this occasion to the steward, which is in stark contrast to Charles Leclerc at the Mexico City Grand Prix last year, when Carlos used the F word, inadvertent as it was with his use of the F word on that occasion. Nevertheless, the way Charles presented himself to the FIA delegate when they had words post the use of that swear word, it was in complete contrast to the way Carlos presented himself. So that is why, on this occasion, there is this discrepancy between Charles Leclerc being fined €10,000 for his use of a swear word and Carlos Sainz not being subjected to any steward's investigation. Case closed.
And just a case closed. And just a final talking point, Ian. A big talking point, not just in Bahrain, but actually for the last few weeks, has been, of course, V10 engines. Will they be coming back? Will they not be coming back instead of the 2026 regs, maybe further on down the line? And a big question around that has been, what would Audi make of it all, given obviously the money they put in to enter the sport in 2026? Well, they've come out and said that for the current regulations as they're written, they are fully committed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, perhaps it was a meeting that was overblown, shall we say. We knew it was going to happen. The five engine manufacturers, representatives of the five engine manufacturers, sitting down with the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, who we know has been quite vocal in suggesting that maybe V10s could make an appearance somewhere down the line using sustainable fuels. So Stefano Domenicali as well, also present, representing F1 quite naturally. And in the end, it was quite an amicable meeting. The bottom line is the train has left the station for next year. These power units will be coming into being in 2026 when we got no MGUH on board, of course, sustainable fuels coming in, as I've mentioned. But beyond that, talks are still going to take place because there was this push, shall we say. There's been a lot of talk about it. Maybe we could have V10s somewhere further down the line, because we all know that everybody in the past with a bit of rose-tinted glasses, so to say, has loved the V10s, the sound of the V10s. And there's maybe a feeling that we could have a V10 engine, but with fully sustainable fuels driving it. So it's not done completely. But for 26, that train has left the station. We are going to see a new power unit in F1, but it will not be the immediate V10 recall, as perhaps many were suggesting might just be the case.
And of course, to our fans, like this video if you'd like to see V10s return to the sport, but also comment below on your thoughts around the whole saga, whether we should go to V10s with sustainable fuel, whether we should just stick with the 2026 regs as they're currently written. And of course, let us know your thoughts in general of the Bahrain Grand Prix so far and who you think is going to claim pole position. Ian, amazing stuff. As always, to our fans, please do smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. And from Ian under the night sky in Bahrain, myself under the sunny sky in Miami, Ian and I will see you on Saturday post-qualify. See you later.
We'll be a good one, folks. Stay tuned.